Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for asking me to speak here, and welcome. Before I say anything, I want to say to you that what I'm about to say to you, I'm saying to myself as well. I've always aspired to be a good leader, and I'm still hoping to get there. The first lesson I had in leadership was when I was 13, and my grandfather, who fought in the First World War, lost a lung through mustard gas poisoning. In the Second World War, was part of the Home Guard, but he was also running a printing business. And he had about 45 people there, which is quite a lot in those days, actually. And guess what? It got bombed and razed to the ground fairly early on. Near the end of the war, it happened all over again. And he went to work to see how bad it was, and it was terrible. And every single member of staff turned up. And he said to them, "You better go home, because I haven't got any money. I can't pay you." And they said, his name was Jack, and they said, "Jack, you will pay us when you can. We're coming to work." And I thought, wow, if I could ever get that kind of loyalty from my staff, I guess I've got one step further forwards. And that was 13, and it's never left me. So I've sort of thought of 5 things which I think are part of leadership, which I'd like to talk to you about now. Then I'm going to ask you some questions for you to take away and think about for yourselves. And then after that, there'll be Q&A, so you can absolutely muller me if you want to. Firstly, I think it's really important that leaders understand that they have to listen and learn. A good leader is a good listener. Fine, go to a meeting with a view, but be prepared to change that view if somebody brings a new point of view, angle that you hadn't thought about. Be prepared to rethink your own viewpoint because you've been given new information. It's not about standing on a soapbox, waving a big stick. It's about listening. Secondly, I would suggest one always needs to think ahead, 5 and 10 years. Some people call it having a vision. I don't know whether that's a good analogy or not, but I do know one needs to think ahead. And as one thinks ahead, don't just think about the good times, because they may happen. Think about the bad times, because they may happen too. And I can tell you, having now been fortunate enough of starting up 2 insurance businesses, you can plan the timing, all that good stuff. But guess what? When you start a new insurance business, you have de facto an unbalanced account. You don't get on all the business day one. And you can get lucky and miss all the claims if you're not on the business. Or you can get unlucky and be on every single claim because they happen to be the risks that you wrote. That bit's luck. And you need to work out, okay, if I get lucky, how do I react? But also if I get unlucky, how do I react? Thirdly, I think you need to learn how to delegate with clarity of responsibilities. One of the challenges is actually believing that you can do it 100% well, and there's nobody in your firm that can do anything like close to they get to is 90%. Doesn't matter. You have to learn to delegate. You have to allow people to make mistakes. You have to give people rope. But I always watched Jeff Greenberg. So I was an advisor there for a couple of years. And to my amazement, he sat and listened for a long, long time to people. But he was always holding the rope. And if somebody went too far, he'd just yank it. At the end of the day, if somebody hangs themselves, that's their problem, not yours, but they've done the hanging. So delegate, accept people can't do it quite as the way or as well as you might do it yourself, but it's good enough and they will learn by doing it. Fourthly, I think it's really important to lead by example from the front. And be prepared to make mistakes. I said in a town hall once to Callan, if you don't make one big mistake a year, you're just not trying hard enough. And I said it with a sort of lightness of touch. But actually I meant it. Because mistakes is how we learn. If I'm truthful with all of you, I've learned far more by my mistakes than I have by the things I've got right. The important thing about making a mistake is to recognize you've made it, self-appraisal. Work out how you did it, work out why you did it, and then make absolutely certain that you don't repeat it. And encourage people around you not to worry about making a mistake, because that's part of growing up, it's part of learning, but encourage them to own up to it, very important. If you don't fess up to a mistake, you can pretend it hasn't happened. If you own up to it, then you can work out what can I do about it, and how do I make certain I don't do it again. I think if you stick to those 4 principles, and I'm quite sure in Q&A you'll point out some other principles that should be there, you will actually build a strong, stable team who can stand the test of time. It's popular nowadays for people to work in one place for 3 years, maybe 5 years. We've got people who worked at CAT and now working at Convex. A number of people have done over 25 years. Now, they don't do that for money, per se. They don't do that because they feel comfortable. They do that because they actually like working with the people that are there. And it's not the leader that does that. It's the team that does that. Now, if you've created a good team, you de facto are creating a succession. As people like me getting old, at some point you have to step down. So those are the sort of brief thoughts in my mind as to what is important about leadership and what you can learn from it. So, very important to carry people. Very important to have a vision. And be prepared to stand up and be counted. You are accountable for what you do. We all are. And as a leader, you have to say, I made that mistake, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Or that was the right decision. So that's a sort of a brief overview for you to maybe go away and think about what it's all about. Questions that you might ask yourself as you go away. Do you have to agree on everything with the leader? I would say no, by the way. You need to agree on the important general thrust. And you need to have respect. Respect is two-way. Are you entitled to a separate opinion on the issue? Absolutely. How do you lead in a subscription market? I mean, both London and Bermuda are probably the 2 best subscription markets in the world. In fact, they are. How do we lead and how do we respect leads in a subscription marketplace? Is leadership powerful? Is it a requirement? Do you think leaders deserve accolades? How do you follow a leader? And then lastly, do you think leadership leads to better decision making? Those are questions for you to think about over the next week or so, as to where you think you are, how you think you should look for a good leader, how you can be a good leader, how you can work in a team. So I hope I've said enough to think about life. I'm kind of hoping you don't agree with me on everything, so we can have a debate, and happily open it up for questions. If you put your hand up, you'll be given a mic, so the rest of the audience can hear. Thank you. And of course, somebody has to be the brave one to ask the first question. So from there, thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, Stephen. You mentioned the fact this is the second insurance company you've started up. Do you regard it all as one continuous journey?
Yes and no. I thought we'd have to build a culture again, second time round. I wasn't unduly concerned about that because we'd done it before. We knew what to do, and I thought, well, it might take 5 years. What surprised me was the culture walked in the door. And people came to Convex because of either they worked at Catlin or seen how Catlin worked and wanted part of that story. And I had not expected that to happen. I thought it actually broke my heart. I thought we'd lost our culture completely. It was dead. But the benefit of what we did previously definitely helped what we did in the last 5 years. And I'd say to all of you of whatever age, one of the lessons I've learned is, excuse me, what goes round comes round. And I'm still paying for mistakes I made 50 years ago, which is not a great feeling, I have to tell you. But, I think if you see life as a continuum, then setting up a new business de facto becomes a continuum. But it is a new start, and we had the opportunity to rethink how we did things and what we wanted to be involved in. And honestly, our second start was better, more advised than our first start. No surprise in that. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks very much. So whilst the culture may have walked in the door, in your words, you clearly just said that you had a plan of how you were going to create the culture that you wanted. What did that look like? If it hadn't walked through the door, what were you going to do as leaders in order to create the optimal culture that you wanted?
Well, I think you've got to react to the circumstance you find yourself in. I say that straight away. I don't think one can be absolutely rock solid about how this is going to happen. But my experience has been if you work with good people who trust you and trust each other, and who recognize that different people bring different values to the table, you get a better discussion, a better debate, a better outcome, and a greater sense of togetherness. How that actually happens, I think, very much varies on the individual characters you have. I mean, some people have to be quietened down a bit, and some people have to be, come on, tell us what you think. I found actually when you're having discussions, maybe it's quite detailed, and there's maybe half of the meeting know about it in detail. Actually listening to the outsiders can be very revealing, because they can see the devil in the room, and everybody else is so close to the action and concentrating on getting it right. They haven't taken one step back and looked at the bigger picture and said, does that make sense? Everybody adds value in the meeting, or they should do. And it's up to the leader to create an environment where they can express their view and not feel they're going to be got at.
Can you hear me? Yes. Stephen, obviously conferences like this, reinsurance conferences, lots of discussion around rates, renewal, underwriting, you name it. I'm curious, why did you want to talk about leadership today?
Because I think it's important. Thank you for the question. I think it's not talked about in the way it used to be when I was younger. I can remember in my school days and beyond, I'm a post-war baby, by a year or two. I remember growing up, there was a lot of talk about a leader who's good in wartime as opposed to a leader who's good in peacetime, and how it's very rare to get a leader that's good at both. And leadership as a topic was something that often got talked about when I was younger. I think for some reason we sort of shied away from talking about leadership. And I have to say to Arthur, said, what do you want to speak about? And I thought, well, maybe I'll talk about leadership. And you know what I thought was a frightfully good idea. I was really pleased with myself. And the closer I got to today, the more scared I got about doing it. Because I wouldn't want you to think I'm a great leader. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think leadership is important. And I think we should recognize it and work at it, whether you're a leader or a follower. And if you're a follower, make certain you're following a good leader.
Thinking about good leaders that you've worked with in your lifetime, in and outside of our sector, who do you most admire and why?
I think one admires people for different reasons and in different ways, and it's quite difficult to say that one's better than the other. My grandfather was a good leader, in a way that my father wasn't. In my career, I've had a number of non-exec chairmen. I've had some which I live with. Others I thought were really good. I will bring out two. One was Sir Graham Hearn, who used to be CEO and chairman of Enterprise Oil, which we used to lead years ago. And he left school. He was from Birmingham. He's a Brummie. He left school at the age of 16, and he got himself articled as a lawyer by the age of 19. And in those days, you couldn't practice till you're 21 because of the age of majority. And I always remember one time when I was wanting to get through the boards or something, and he turns to me in the board meeting and says, Stephen, every now and again, the CEO has to put his or her head on the block. Is that one of those occasions, Stephen? So I looked him straight in the eye and said, yes, it is. What he was actually saying to me, I will translate, Stephen, I've got the casting vote, and you only can do this if I vote in favour. I'm prepared to do that, but understand this, my chap. On your own head be it. And if you get it wrong, your head's coming off. Do you still want to do it? That's good leadership, because he supported me, but he made it very clear to me, I'm going to have to live with whatever I have done. And if I'm not that sure I can do it, he's saying, don't do it, don't put your head on the block. Followed him was a chap called John Barton, who sadly passed away. He was chairman of Next, and chairman of EasyJet, and chairman of Catlin. He also left school very young, and he was an accountant by training. He worked for the Jardine family for well over 25 years. Had a completely different style about him, but where I'm so grateful for both of them is they were aware. They didn't tell me what to do, but they did make certain that I was aware of what was going on around me to help me make a better right decision. I think if you can get the best out of people from that kind of leadership, two forms of it, you're not doing badly.
Good morning, Stephen.
Hi,
Just
John.
a fast question, picking up on your former comment from a previous question. 6 weeks, we're looking for the calendar to change for 2025. Is the reinsurance industry, and specifically Bermuda, are we in a wartime or a peacetime?
Good question, John. I think we're in an uncertain time, and it could be war, it could be peace, actually. I mean, I think it's well known, I stood up must be 7 years now ago and said, we got a real problem in the industry. There's a $100 billion liability hole. And the insider had it out on the street within 3 minutes of me saying it. And somebody said, you don't know what you're talking about, that's absolutely rubbish. You know, it's over 100 billion. And my number two said to me, you undercooked it, it's 200 billion. I said, if I said more than 100, nobody would believe me. I mean, we've still got a residual problem on some insurance balance sheets, which is going to come out in the next, could take 10 years. We're also living in a world which is probably less stable than it's been since the Second World War. I can't think of a time in my lifetime where life is so unstable. And my comments about leadership in the insurance industry apply to leaders in politics. And you look around the world, tell me, how many good leaders do you see in politics? And what's that going to mean? And that, by the way, is an apolitical comment. It's about leadership. Then the third thing I would say is that the uncertainty of the value and use of technology will be a game changer, without doubt in my mind. And this industry, we've been light over time. We need to catch up. We are catching up, but I'm afraid they're going to be winners and losers. If you miss the train on technology, you miss the train. So I think there's a lot going on that could persuade us that it's a great time to be in the industry and a great time to be alive. There's quite a lot going on which says, blimey, this is a bit hairy. What's going to happen next? And therefore, when we talk about underwriting and risk, I think all of us have to reassess the risk we're taking and indeed reassess the price we're charging to take that risk.
Is that on? Yes. How do you think about the importance of being liked versus the importance of being respected when you lead?
I think being liked is a dangerous aspiration, actually. I think being respected has huge value. Personally, I've always wanted to be respected, and I've realized that some people will like me and some won't. I know people who worry about being liked more than being respected, and I think they have a habit of falling over more quickly. I think if you've got respect, when you make a mistake, you've got a much better chance of being forgiven, a much better chance of learning from it. So I would put respect number one by a very large margin. There's one more time for one more question, and that's it.
Do you think it's important to be liked to be respected? Sorry, I'm being outrageously greedy asking a follow-up, but do you think it's important to be liked to be respected in that context, though?
Do I think it'd be important?
To be liked to be respected in that context?
Being respected is really important, because people will listen to you and think through what you've said. Being liked helps, but answering a question or doing something just so you can be liked, I would submit, is the wrong way. You want to do something so that you're respected. And even if people say, why on earth did you do that? I've been through that myself. And then a few weeks, months, even years later, they say, I get that now. I understand why you said that, why you did that. At the time I didn't. I thought you were completely wrong. And that does happen in business. And I think we need to be aware of it if we're leaders, and we need to be aware of it if we're followers. None of us are perfect, and I'm certainly not perfect. Good. Well, look, thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been food for thought. I hope you'll go away and think through some of the issues I've raised. I don't expect you to agree with everything I said, but I would hope that you think it through and decide for yourself what is relevant. Thank you very much.